Adam, men's basketball, not a ton of public movement for the Tar Heels. We still, as of the time that Adam and I are talking, don't have any public declarations from R.J. Davis or Harrison Ingram, which I think it's fair to say are the two players that you're waiting on the most if you're the Tar Heels. Now there have not been, and this is hard to know, like, do you expect a public statement from every player on the team? Like, is every player going to go, yes, I will be back? Or is it just assumed, and I'm going to pick a name, Jalen Washington, for example, is it just assumed, yes, Jalen Washington will be back? I don't know if I know that answer. Certainly there have been a ton of reports about who the Tar Heels have reached out to and talked to, and due to those reports, it appears as though Carolina is in the market for some help in the post and some outside shooting, both of which make sense to me as things that Carolina would need in this particular iteration of the portal. So not a ton of public movement. I would have to think that there's going to be some movement here in the next couple of days or weeks for the Tar Heels because you got to get your team together. And so I think it's important to remember that just because things haven't been reported doesn't mean that the staff doesn't know what's going on. And so they obviously know a lot more about it than you and I do.
And I think people get frustrated when they see other bigger type power conference schools having players leave and come in. And then the natural reaction is to say, well, School X is getting players and Carolina is not. The Tar Heels clearly are going to be outmanned at every position next year. Let's see where we are on June 1st, July 1st, August 1st, all the firsts. First day of classes.
Yeah.
That's when you really know. And I think this staff has proven to be pretty adept at navigating the portal. Brad Frederick, I think, is really important there. But the entire staff works on it, and you have to. You have to work on it all the time. And so I think let's see how it goes. It's not time to freak out right now.
Adam, just one kind of national landscape picture question or topic on basketball. We've seen all the movement coaching-wise that filtered its way eventually all the way to Kentucky. And Kentucky ends up with Mark Pope, a former player, part of the 96 national championship team, which was a incredibly good college basketball team. Had been the head coach at BYU for a year or two, and now at Kentucky. I only bring that up. Obviously, it doesn't really have anything to do with the Tar Heels directly, other than I do find it interesting, Adam, that arguably the three biggest jobs in college basketball, I guess Kansas would be in that too, Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky, have all come open in the last, 3 years, and they've all hired former players. I do think that speaks to a couple of things. I think it speaks to, and they're all relatively young as well. I think it speaks to the energy level needed to be a head coach right now. I think it speaks to the transition of the game. And look, you don't have to have played the game at a high level to be good as a coach. I mean, Roy Williams was a member of the freshman team at Carolina, but never played past that, and obviously he was an excellent coach. Mike Krzyzewski played at Army, but never past that, and he was an excellent coach. So we understand that you don't have to have played in the NBA or to be a starter on a championship-level team to be a good coach. But I do think, Adam, the game is moving, the profession is moving in that direction some, where you're seeing these guys, and I think, from a Carolina perspective, I think it's helped Hubert Davis. I think it's been a benefit for him to say, look, I did what you want to do. I had success at college. I played in the league. And obviously you're going to understand basketball if you've been around it that long too. So I don't really have a point here other than I just find it interesting that all three of those jobs went to similar type of people, guys who maybe didn't have a ton of experience. Mark Pope had a little more than John Shire and Hubert Davis did. Certainly he's been a head coach at a big place before. But it was not. Now, we understand that Kentucky did go after some other guys, but it was not the huge names that got one of these jobs. It was some guys who had a lower profile but had important ties to those particular places.
I was a little skeptical of the Mark Pope thing until the press conference where they introduced him. And 20,000 people showed up for that. I mean, that might work.
Well, and again, this is from 10,000 feet. I think Kentucky fans were tired of celebrating how many NBA draft picks they had, and they had a lot. They wanted to celebrate wins and championships, which is understandable. Now, certainly we all understand that talent helps with wins and championships, but it seems like they did something that I know Carolina did, and I'm guessing Duke feels like it did with John Shire, and that is they hired somebody who understands the importance of the job and the sport to that place. Mark Pope seems to understand the importance of Kentucky basketball to Kentucky, has been successful there, and I think again, to bring this back to Carolina, I think we have seen that it does matter. Like, I think that's one of Hubert Davis's greatest strengths is that he understands the importance here. He understands the uniqueness of it here. He understands why Carolina is different than Kentucky, why it's different than Duke, why it's different than Ohio State or Kansas or UCLA or whoever. He gets that. And so they've all gone down this similar path.
Yeah. Kentucky, I don't feel like has ever really embraced the whole family aspect as much as Carolina did, or Duke after they convened some marketing meetings and came up with the Brotherhood and decided that was something they had always firmly believed in.
Yeah.
Right up until they put it on the T-shirt. I don't know as much about Kentucky, but I don't feel like that's been something that's been as important to them, but it feels like they want it to be now. So you've now got the three biggest schools, three biggest programs selling that, and then also Kansas, who I think should definitely hire Danny Manning.
Yeah.
To go ahead and complete this quad and see how that goes. But, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time in college basketball because you got Cal going to Arkansas, where I do think he'll be incredibly successful because his method of building a team at Kentucky for all these years, that's perfect for Arkansas in this era of college basketball. Just go find the players and pay their price and have them come for a year and then start all over next year. I think that's a really good fit for Arkansas. And weirdly, we've gotten to the point where these three very prominent programs have sort of come full circle and come back around to, all right, we're going back to the family thing and it being important to understand the culture.
And we certainly know that you can win at Arkansas. I mean, they've won a national title relatively recently in 1994. So,
well, I think we talked.
That's sad that I think that's relatively, it was 30 years ago. And in 1994, that would have been 1964. And I did not feel like that was relatively recently at that point in time.
Just a couple of years ago.
In my experience, I remember Arkansas being good in the early to mid 1990s.
You know, when Scotty Thurman was there.
Yes.
Now, have we had his daughter in here talking about being a college athlete?
Look,
yes.
Corliss Williamson was tough to keep off the glass.
Well, I think we talked about this last summer when I had my first ever experience in Arkansas. They have got a lot of money and don't really know what to do with it, which is exactly what John Calipari needs. He needs people to give him a lot of money.
If there's one thing John Calipari knows, it's he can help you spend your money.
Yes. And I thought it was interesting that his press conference, he made the point, sort of taking a shot of Kentucky at the same time. He was like, well, they've already got the NIL in place here. I don't have to go out and get it like I did at Kentucky. That's a big part of hiring a coach now. Do you have that in place for them? And if so, that makes your job very attractive. Next thing you know, you're calling the hogs, just like you've been doing your whole entire life, just like Cal.
So, a lot going on, a lot of movement. This has become such a wild time of year for both sports, in football and basketball, just so much.
Well, I thought it was very odd so BYU replaced Mark Pope, or is going to replace Mark Pope, with Kevin Young, who is an assistant for the Suns. And one of the things that they talked about, I guess, was that he wanted to have a slower paced lifestyle. So he was leaving the NBA to go to college basketball to be around home more. Kevin Young, you might be surprised, sir.
Was the Chris Burgess who was in the mix for that job, is that Duke Chris Burgess?
I didn't know he was in the mix, but it's got to be, right? He was from there.
Yeah. He was from Utah, right?
Yeah. Wait, is he a coach now?
I think so.
He's not just a backup center?
Who never quite lived up to his potential?
Boy, you're right, Jones. It's not 1994 anymore.
What about Cherokee Parks? Do you think that maybe he
is Eric Meek involved somehow?
All right, let's see. Yeah, here he is. Chris Burgess.
He's a coach?
He's a basketball player, assistant coach for Utah, the Utes.
Huh.
Yeah, started his career at Duke and ended up at Utah.
Okay. I didn't know he was in the mix.
Yeah. Looks like he played overseas for a long time after that.
That sounds right.
Long time. At many different places. So there you go.
Remember those guys?
Yeah. Remember, that's definitely we need to remember those guys back.
Yeah.
Remember those guys? We should bring that back.